Hello, this is Ed Sullivan, editor of Building Operating Management magazine. Thanks for joining us for today's webcast, Using Events to Your Institution's Advantage, Recoup Costs and Gain More Value. Our presenter today is Michael Bremer. Michael is a senior solutions consultant for Dude Solutions, a market leader in providing solutions to streamline areas of facility operations. At Dude Solutions, Michael is responsible for creating product presentations for speaking engagements and online seminars that align with industry best practices to increase operations and efficiency. Prior to joining Dude Solutions, Michael worked for 6 years in public education with experience in athletics, community involvement, and safety. Today's webcast learning objectives include understand the importance of collecting data, learn how to recoup costs and streamline your billing process, realize that events can create positive PR for your institution, understand how utility costs tie into events and how managing them saves money. Before we get started with the webcast, I'd like to cover a few details about the event. A live question and answer session will follow the presentation. To submit questions, please use the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen and send your question to all panelists. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time permits. Today's event will also include an interactive multiple-choice polling question. We ask that you participate in this poll. Your input is very much appreciated. At the conclusion of today's webcast, you will receive a PDF copy of today's presentation slides. You will also receive a link to a brief online assessment. Upon successful completion of this assessment, you will receive your CEU certificate. Today's webcast will also be archived at facilitiesnet.com/webcasts. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michael.
Thank you so much, Ed. Again, like Ed mentioned, today we're going to be discussing using events to your institution's advantage. We understand there's a lot of different moving parts when it comes to event management and facility usage at your institutions. Today we're going to focus on some of those moving parts and how to streamline that process and gain efficiencies. For today's agenda, first, we'll be looking at some of the industry trends for event management in education today. Then we'll be discussing best practices around what data should be tracked and how to leverage the data to support your event management needs. We'll show a brief overview of Event Manager from Dude Solutions, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A. The foundation of our presentation today comes from Dude Solutions, helping educational institutions track event management and facility usage for over 15 years. By doing so, this has helped us and our clients leverage the data tracked to help make better operational decisions today, but also get a better data-driven understanding of what's next. How can we increase efficiency and better streamline the process? What do we need to start tracking that we aren't today? Let's look at the current state of events. Let's talk about some of the trends in event management today according to Event Manager blog. Event marketing, such as the use of social media streams, tools, email marketing, and websites, is the largest trend that we're seeing today. Through an Educational Operations Health Index, Dude Solutions was able to survey educational institutions. One of the highlights of the feedback was education facilities for community events such as educational classes, workshops, and engagement activities continue to be an area of focus. Another trend in the use of event management software, according to a recent study, 40% of event planners or facility coordinators are using event management software. The results of using a centralized solution that meets the needs of the entire event management process helps drive efficiency, increases communication, brings the individual locations and departments of an institution together, leads to better data, and provides a better opportunity of successful, well-managed events. In some communities, the educational institution is the center of town. They have facilities that are offered for community use as well as the internal use. These facilities offer prime locations for students, faculty and staff, alumni, and the community to host events. These events are often an important part of how schools interact with the community they support. Events can also present a challenge to your team and have a big impact on the budget. Because of these challenges and other challenges, your institution need a solid infrastructure. Implementing an effective cost recovery program hinges on having a solid infrastructure in place for tracking expenses, invoicing, tracking maintenance, and other event support. We'll look closer at each one of these as we move through today's presentation. To get the ultimate value from your process and recover costs or generate revenue, here are some steps you can take. Your steps may not be in this exact order. Start collecting data. Types of data to collect includes how many events do you have? What types of organizations are using your facilities? What organizations use the facilities most often? What spaces are being used? What's the cost to your institution for hosting these events? Develop a fee structure, recoup costs, and streamlining billing process. I'm going to group those three together. Meet with your decision makers and your stakeholders to decide on what this should look like. We've developed a cost recovery calculator, but there's other good resources out there to help. Manage your relationships by providing necessary information to the community about facility usage and events that you're promoting. Track and manage utility cost, an interesting one to really start to examine, and again, we'll dive deeper into that later on in the presentation, but track and manage utility costs and other costs from facility usage, and we'll speak specifically about those other costs. That brings us to our first polling question. Please direct your attention to the right-hand side of the screen. Our first question today is, how would you rate the overall event management process at your institution from request to approval on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best? Please take a moment to select and submit the answer that best suits your institution.
Hi, we have the results of the polling question. This is Ed Sullivan. And again, the question is, how would you rate the event management process at your institution on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being the worst and 5 being the best? 7% said number 1. 7% scored it a 2. 50% scored it a 3. 36% scored it a 4, and no one scored it a 5, or the top of this chart. Michael, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, interesting to hear those numbers, and I think those numbers and responses are things that we've been hearing, and the feedback that we've been able to collect and hear from our clients over the last 15 years regarding facility usage. All right. Now, let's take a look at each one of those recommended steps we just talked about a little bit closer. So, collecting data. What type of data are we looking to collect, and what type of data are we recommending that you collect to help you out in this process? Well, measure everything. Here you see a quote, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been, or I'll simplify that and just say you don't know what you don't know. So what should you track? The goal is to make smarter business decisions that are based off of the data you've gathered. These decisions are designed to help improve customer satisfaction and increase efficiency and ROI. Here you see different examples: volume and type of event requests, location, what locations are being utilized most often, are the events that are happening in the appropriate spaces. As an example, if we have an event that is for 50 people, we probably don't want to be utilizing spaces that hold 100 plus people. Think about the cost, especially the energy impact there. Staff hours. Now think about everybody that's involved in the facility usage process, from the point of a request being submitted through approval, creating an invoice, until the event is actually approved itself, and now we're supporting that event with different types of service providers, our maintenance staff, custodial staff, event setup staff, and so on. Utility costs, lights, air condition. Events cost invoice versus what is received. We'll take a closer look at some of these in a little bit more detail as we make it through here. Measuring outcomes. Tracking this type of data will help improve, support, or make changes to a cost recovery or revenue generating program. At an institution in Massachusetts a few years ago, someone at the school asked how much it was costing them to support after-hour events. Good question. By having access to the data, they were able to conclude it costs around $110,000 to support after-hour events. With working with key stakeholders, the institution was able to make adjustments and start recovering more of the lost revenue. Recoup cost and or generate revenue. Now, the difference here is some educational institutions currently don't recover any cost to utilize their facilities. It's free. Some recover some cost, and some generate revenue from facility usage. We hear a lot of reasons why this is the case, but each institution is perhaps in a little bit different place when it comes to cost recovery or generating revenue for facility usage. So no matter what place you're in, I'm sure we all have goals, so we need to build a business case. When you collect data, you can track and know events-related costs, including staff hours to set up space. So we talked a little bit earlier about staff hours. What types of hours are we looking to track here? I would say not only the staff hours to set up space that your maintenance department or your custodial department and others are responsible for in supporting the setup, but also who's managing the workflow and approval process. You have administration that handles that process, that takes time out of their day to approve and push along the process. And then you have others that are involved in supporting the events. So staff hours, very important. Utility costs, heat, light. Administration time on processing events, we just talked about that. And then wear and tear on equipment and the facilities. I'm going to add one more here, supply cost. People come into your facilities, they're using space, they're there for an hour or hours. Think about the custodial supplies, cleaning up after events. So those custodial supplies that are used. I'm sure the people that are coming into your facilities are using the restrooms, paper products, soap, and etc. So we build a case, and then part of that is understanding what should be charged if you're going to start charging for events. I would love to know how many institutions today know how much it costs your institution to host events in your facilities. And we talked about that case study just a while ago with an institution in Massachusetts. But we need to identify what it's costing the institution to host events and support these events in the facilities. But the reality is a lot just don't know or just don't know where to start or don't have the data to come to a conclusion around that number. Here's a good benchmark for you to use. Use one event per student per year as that benchmark. So as an example, a 5,000 student institution is having about 5,000 events per year from the data we've been able to collect for over 15 years. this is costing that institution around $281,000 to support those events. Again, go back to the wear and tear, the staff hours, and so on. With that being said, it's a good idea to research the market. What are other facilities in your area charging for facility usage? Go back to the data that you're collecting. Oftentimes, there's other key stakeholders involved in deciding on these charges, whether it's your administration team, at a public school district, your school board, and others. Managing your PR and reputation. Reputation and enrollment have a direct correlation. Research shows that. Hosting well put together events benefits your organization's reputation and enrollment. Also, institutions that charge for events know that recouping costs is critical to the ongoing health and upkeep of the facility, which has a direct impact on the student learning environment. Think about curb appeal these days, and I'm not talking necessarily about me driving by an institution and looking at the facilities. I'm talking about the curb appeal of your website. When visitors go to your website, whether it's somebody in the community and they're going to your school's website, maybe it's a parent in the community, a student, faculty or staff member, maybe it's a student that's thinking about going to your institution. They're going to the website, and what are they seeing on your website? Obviously, and hopefully, they're looking at different classes and opportunities as a student, but also what's going on around that community in that institution? What events are being held at that institution? As me, as an athletic junkie, I'm probably going to look at the different athletic types of events, but maybe some of the different student club activities that you have going on. I'm an alumni. Maybe I'm looking at different alumni types of events. So how do you manage that PR and reputation with the whole community overall? And when we say community, just want to clarify, we're not just talking about outside community. We're talking about the complete community that really entails the whole institution, including faculty, staff, students, parents, and so on. On average, again, there's one event per student annually. You need adequate staff to support those events. We've talked a little bit about supporting the events. They need to be paid. You can't fix wear and tear on facilities from events without recouping costs or generating revenue. Think about, again, going back to athletics, all the events that happen on a field, athletic field, or inside of a gym, the wear and tear on those spaces. How do we make sure that we have well-maintained facilities such as those gyms and fields and other facilities if we're not recouping those costs? Institutions can still offer discounted rates and programs to nonprofits or depending on the classifications of institutions. We understand it's not a one-size-fits-all when it comes to cost recovery and your invoicing process. But this is a great opportunity to create positive PR and impact on the community. So, developing fee structures and streamlining that bill process. Develop your fee structures. Here are some examples of fees we see for facility usage. Flat fees being the first one, maybe a good first step in building out fee structures. Flat fees can also be used if the event requires certain features like the use of a projector or other AV equipment. Tiered pricing gives more flexibility and typically is set based on specific variables such as the space being utilized, how long is the event, what classification of organization is utilizing the facility, support that goes into the event, even what day of week is the event. I've even heard about tiered pricing based on seasonality, certain fees for certain times of the year. Streamline your billing process, something we hear about all the time. Here are some good benchmarks to track. Year-over-year cost recouped and or revenue generated, right? Being able to see what was recovered in 2016 versus 2017 versus 2018, the amount invoiced versus payments received, number of reminder emails required to generate returns. I know that could be a big headache for institutions. Hey, you create an invoice, you generate it, you send it out, and then having to keep up with whether it was paid or not, and the impact of invoice timing on cost recovery. This will allow you to know how you're doing compared to these benchmarks, tell you a lot about your process, and show areas of improvement. Utility costs. The last step, and very interesting one, is the impact of events on energy consumption and cost. Are you able to look at your energy bills and tell why cost and consumption spike? Again, going back to some of the byproducts of having an efficient, streamlined process in place and an event management software solution in place is bringing the institution together, different departments in different locations together. So you may be asking yourself, well, how does utility costs come into play with the event management process? Well, this allows you to understand the impact of the events on that utility consumption and cost. So are you able to look at your energy bills and tell why cost and consumption spike? Was it because of the number of events in your institution? You can use this data to put forth a better energy conservation program and support having utility costs as line items for facility usage back on the invoicing. We'll look at some examples as we go through a brief overview and demonstration of Event Manager. Before we do an overview of Event Manager, I want to take a look at some of the things that are coming down the pipeline here regarding Event Manager. So one of those items and enhancements is import functionality. We understand that it's a big need for educational institutions that may not have a centralized master calendar and different departments doing different things and utilizing different types of calendars, not only to have a master centralized calendar, but perhaps to work with other calendars that an institution may be utilizing. If it's higher education, often we hear about utilizing or pulling in schedules from your classroom scheduling provider. We also hear often about working with what your athletic departments are utilizing to schedule their games and perhaps practices, and being able to pull that information into that centralized event management platform and program. So we're going to be increasing and enhancing the experience around the importing functionality into our event management solution. This provides less room for error with data entry, and again, big overwhelming value on that centralized master calendar, so you can see everything that's going on. Your departments are working together. Plus, we know what spaces are being utilized for internal events and when those spaces are not being utilized, so perhaps we can utilize them for other types of events, whether those internal or requested by outside community groups. Obviously, we spent a good part of today's conversation around collecting data. What type of data should we be collecting and analyzing to help you throughout this event management process? So that leads us to developing more reporting functionality. Multiple reports are going to be added, understanding utilization, conflicts, event details, organizations, invoicing, and payments. We'll actually look at a few of those examples today as well. So at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and jump in, do a brief overview of Event Manager from Dude Solutions. And after that, we will get into some Q&A as well as another polling question. So bear with me here for just a moment as I go ahead and share out my screen. All right, at this point in time, we should see right there in the middle of the screen where it says DSI Community Facility Usage. What we're looking at right now is what we call a community portal. So again, we understand there's multiple moving parts, a lot of people involved in the event management process and facility usage request process. And a lot of times your institutions are offering your facilities to outside community groups or maybe citizens in the community or other types of users. So you want to be able to streamline that process and provide them good information so they can go through that process and hopefully not have to spend a bunch of time looking or emailing or calling or maybe even stopping in at the institution to try and get this process going. So we have the opportunity here of highlighting your spaces, whether we're looking at featured spaces here at the top or all of your spaces. Another key component to this process when it comes to any requesters, whether it's internal requesters or community requesters, is providing them opportunities of searching for spaces that they're looking for based on their criteria and their details of their event. Maybe I'm looking to have an event and it's going to be 50 people. So show me the capacity in spaces that hold somewhere around 50 people. Or maybe I'm looking for certain types of features that have that are in your spaces. Maybe I need Wi-Fi connection, projectors, and so on. Let's zoom in on a specific space here. So I'm going to go to those featured locations. So again, tying this all together, maybe these featured locations are your most utilized spaces. Maybe they're the most energy efficient spaces. Now, with each of your spaces here, you'll have the opportunity of identifying information and, again, providing what information you want to your requesters so that they can make a well-educated request. Where is this space located? What's the capacity of this space? Maybe a nice little descriptive paragraph, a little blurb in there about the space. And then, very important, what is this space typically used for? Want to make sure that this will meet my needs. What's in that space? What are those features? Projector, Wi-Fi connection, tables, chairs, access to a kitchen, and then available room setup. Talk to a lot of educational institutions that want to standardize that process for room setup. So here, maybe these are the different room configuration options that you offer for this space to be set up. Not only the different room configuration options, but if we were to choose one of these options, what's the capacity of the space, and is there an additional cost for us to utilize one of these room configurations? Now I'm going to jump over more to the administrative side of the solution here, and we're going to hit on some specifics. And the first thing that I want to talk about is that invoicing and establishing your cost recovery program in a solution such as this. So I'm going to go to the settings first, and we're really going to talk about building that foundation for invoicing. And again, this goes back to talking about the different line items and what types of charges should be associated for facility usage. Now, I'm going to drop down because I want to explain this in some good detail here and talk about building that foundation, really the template of invoicing, which is your institution's information that shows up on an invoice and information regarding late fees and payments, back to those past due reminders. So here you can establish, hey, I want to be able to, once that invoice hits the past due mark, I want to be able to generate an automated notification, maybe 1 day, 3 days, 5 days. You can have as many past due reminders as you like to. That can automate a notification sent out to that organization or that user that you've invoiced. Now, I know some institutions have separate application fees, so you can generate a separate invoice for application fees. But let's really focus in on some examples of line items, and then we're going to discuss financial packages. Now, with your line items, back to what we discussed earlier in the presentation, whether those are flat or tiered fees, here we're looking at some fees that are hourly rates or flat rates, things like energy costs, field lights, maybe they're utilizing additional types of equipment or inventory like tables and chairs. You have your custodial fees, your grounds fees, security, and so on, IT, AV. So those are some examples of individual line items. Now, to help streamline that process a little bit further, you can build out financial packages. Now, financial packages give you the ability of creating multiple line items or having multiple line items associated to a financial package. And then if there's any other types of fees or discounts, maybe you're waiving the fees because it's a nonprofit with a lot of students involved, it's an internal event, taxes if those apply, and then also the ability of establishing budget codes and being able to pull from those budget codes if you're doing something like chargebacks, very common in higher educational institutions. Now let's actually walk through the process of creating an invoice. Now when it comes to invoicing, there's typically two options. We can manually create an invoice, which I'm going to go in here and create an invoice. But also, before I start creating the invoice, there's also the opportunity in a lot of these event management programs to automate that invoicing process to the point of where it's really hands-off. I would suggest if you're looking for a program that allows you to batch configure, automate the invoicing process, that's where you're probably a couple steps ahead and you have a very structured fee program in place, and you know the differences between fees versus this location versus that location, or this organization versus that organization. But here, let's actually walk through the process of creating an invoice. When do we want to issue the invoice out? Let's just go ahead and say now. When is the invoice due? Which here, maybe you have certain terms, 30, 60, 90 days. The ability of invoicing an organization or an individual user. Now I'm going to go ahead and type in a name of an organization here that I typically use. And watch what happens here. A name automatically populates. That's who we deem the treasurer of that organization. We want them to receive the invoice, but we can also add additional recipients. You can have your institution's information over here on the right-hand side, or where the payment perhaps needs to go. Let's go ahead and just pick an event here. It doesn't matter what event I pick. I'm just going to go in here and pick one. Now, you'll notice here that a financial package automatically populated. I'm actually going to get rid of that for a second. Now, here, let's show you some examples. First thing, some line items. So let's add one individual line item, like a custodial service fee. Now, for whatever reason, if you need to make adjustments to that line item, you can do that. Maybe I need to change it from an hourly to a flat. Maybe I need to change the cost for some reason. Now, the quantity is coming from the duration of the event. 90 minutes, quantity 1.5, that's how it's calculated. Now, let's go ahead and show one other example, and that's going to be one with the box next to it. Those are financial packages. So let's look at what happens when I choose a financial package, and that's where I have multiple line items associated to that financial package. And again, if you need to make adjustments to that, you certainly can. Down here, we can add fees and discounts we talked about earlier, taxes, and then we have that payment information. Now, what's really important here on the left-hand side, you see different statuses of invoices, whether they're paid or overdue or issued and getting ready to go out. So here, this one's been issued. When it comes to payments for invoices, we work with a lot of institutions that perhaps accept just cash or check, money order, credit, but online payment is becoming a very popular option these days. So some of you joining today, maybe you're already offering online payment experiences for invoicing. If you are, great. If not, maybe it's something that you've thought about. But giving the opportunity of not only the organization or that user that you're invoicing, the opportunity of seeing their invoices within their account, but also for paying for that invoice right then and there online through online payment gateways. And then, of course, really important to be able to filter, search, and report on your invoices as well. So we have some quick filters here. Maybe I want to see the next 7 days of invoices that are due or any outstanding invoicing. Maybe I want to take all of these invoices that I filtered and searched through and export those out to a CSV Excel file or PDF or print them out or go ahead and issue all of them at one time. Really looking to streamline that process. I know that's a big goal for a lot of institutions. Being able to quickly visualize and understand your data, having access to dashboards here, events that are going on, being able to see trends month over month. How are your facilities being utilized? Which brings me down to the statistics here. Maybe I want to see what spaces are being utilized. If it's a public school organization that's joining today, it's typically the high schools or your athletic gyms or fields that are getting utilized more often, perhaps your elementary school locations. Being able to visualize any upcoming events and pending events that we're responsible for approving. So really, my goal here within the solution overview was to just talk about streamlining that process for your community to submit requests as well as internal requesters, and really focus around that invoicing process to help you out in your cost recovery or revenue generating programs. So from here, let's go back to the presentation. Now, how can we help out? Dude Solutions offers several solutions in maintenance and operations. Today, we focused in on event management, but we understand that event management impacts a lot of other areas in maintenance and operations. Energy management, we talked about the impact of facility usage on your energy consumption and cost, so being able to track that and understand the impact. Your maintenance departments and IT departments, we see there in orange and yellow, yellow and blue, I should say, are often involved in supporting your events. Your AV, your IT needs, maintenance and your custodial staff that are involved in whether it's in approving events or supporting events. In all of Dude Solutions and all of our programs, we offer cloud-based software for unlimited users. Not only unlimited users, but we also have updates to our software that's pushed out. We provide communication regarding those updates. We take you through tours in the solution of those updates. We talked about a few of those updates to Event Manager today. But also the ongoing support that is offered for all of our solutions. Something like event management, it doesn't just stop at the end of a bell schedule, perhaps. A lot of these events are happening after hours, later at night, on the weekends. I know some of your institutions would probably say there's somebody utilizing our facilities 24/7. And so we need to be able to access this information, whether it's submit a request, approve a request, look at a calendar, or be able to generate invoices as we're on the go. So certainly creating that mobile experience is really important. That's going to take us into our second polling question of today. And before we jump into the Q&A, we'll go ahead and do this polling question. Again, please direct your attention to the right-hand side of the screen. Our final question today is, how would you like us to follow up? What information would you like to see going forward? How can we help you and your institution out regarding what we've talked about today, or perhaps other opportunities that Dude Solution can help with your institutions? Go ahead and give you some time to provide some feedback on that end, and then we'll go ahead and jump into our Q&A.
Michael, thank you very much for a very informative presentation. Members of the audience, once you have completed the polling question, if you have any questions, you can close that polling question and open your Q&A window, and then go ahead and send us any questions that you have. Michael, I have a question here. When it comes to developing fee structures, how do you recommend getting started? Do you know of any resources that can help?
Yeah, so one, I mean, we have to look at if there's any data that's already being collected, but I would start with evaluating the market, and then also a great resource that we have here at Dude Solutions is two resources. One is a cost recovery white paper. That cost recovery white paper was from a study of over 1,700 educational institutions And from that, we were able to develop a cost recovery calculator. We talked a little bit about that earlier on, but what that cost recovery calculator allows you to do is you can plug in your student enrollment size. Right? It doesn't matter if you're a higher education institution, a private independent school, or a public institution or public education K through 12. You simply plug in your student enrollment size, and then it's going to show you how many events you're having per student per year. So again, we use that benchmark, one event per student per year. So if your institution 5,000 students, you're having around 5,000 events. When we're talking about all types of events here, and then it also is going to calculate the M&O cost. So remember when we talked about that case study earlier with that institution in Massachusetts, it was costing them around $110,000. And I gave the other example back to the 5,000 students. If you're a 5,000 student institution, that's costing your institution around $281,000. But what's really cool about that cost recovery calculator, it's going to show you a breakdown of things like utility costs, staff support costs like your custodians and maintenance and IT department, and then other costs. And then you can plug in, if you have any specific information, any specific data, you can plug it in there. And there's some other good resources online that we can point you to. There's another cost recovery calculator that has some pre-built and defined data into it that we work with some organizations and associations in education to create those. So if you're interested in those, certainly let us know. We can certainly get those resources sent out.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Another question. How long does it typically take organizations to get a cost recovery program up and running?
Yeah, I'd like to give a very quick response there and say, hey, 1 year we're up and running, we're good to go. I just can't do that. It's going to depend, right? And it's really kind of where you're at today. A lot of times we talk about crawl, walk, run. Not saying anybody that is in that crawling stage, but if you haven't started recovering costs yet at your institution, and that's something you're thinking about doing, and other key stakeholders, they've been part of this conversation. I would go ahead and start off with once you do some initial analysis and see what others are doing, and certainly us and others can help you out. I would say start off pretty simplified, right? Okay, we know that if it's a nonprofit organization, maybe there's some basic fees, and then grow into that as time goes on. But it's something, Ed, that you're constantly having to go back and analyze that data. That's why it's so important to have a solution in place, a centralized program in place to start collecting this data, to understand how many events we're having, how much time we put into supporting these events, what types of organizations are using the facilities, what facilities are being utilized most often, and start analyzing that data and then make adjustments periodically, right? So, if you're a public school institution, you're probably meeting with the school board to provide that data to, and then start making any adjustments. So, but some institutions, it's a year to 2 years before we have a defined process in place, and then it's a constant reanalysis and making those changes and updates as time goes on. We all understand there's inflation in this world that we have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. Members of the audience, if you have any questions, now is the time to send them in. Michael, one more question at this point. Does Event Manager automate your billing process, and if so, how?
Yeah, so when it comes to invoicing in Event Manager specific, I believe that was the question, in Event Manager, you really have two opportunities. You build the foundation to invoice in the settings like we talked about. You create those line items, financial packages, fees and discounts, taxes, things like that. And then you can manually create an invoice utilizing that template, or we have what's called batch configuration. Now, batch configuration allows you to automatically create the invoice, and you can take that one step further. You can automatically generate the invoice, as well as issue the invoice. So that's really a hands-off process, batch configuration, automating that invoicing process, but there's variables that come into play. And I would say it's probably a phased approach if you're looking at more of an automated invoicing process. You want to establish those line items and those financial packages based on your variables. So maybe that's the classification of organizations, right? There's different fees for a nonprofit versus a for-profit. There's different fees for this space versus this space. And then there's several other variables that come into play there. Once you have that established, though, I'd say let's go ahead and do batch creation of the invoices, but then let's review those invoices first, right? So we're automatically creating, but we're reviewing the invoices before they're issued out. Now let's take that next step. Let's go ahead and batch configure and create the invoices and go ahead and automatically issue the invoices out. And that's really that hands-off experience and complete automation with the invoicing. I hope that answered the question. If not, certainly let us know. We're more than happy to spend some time with you and your institution showing you how that would work.
Okay, Michael, we have a question here. How do we know if the version of School Dude we have can be set up like the one you have shown us? I haven't seen these icons on my system.
Yeah, I'm glad that question came up. So what we looked at today, Event Manager specifically, is Dude Solutions' newest offering in event management to the organizations that we serve. So it's being utilized in the market today, but we also have, again, I mentioned this earlier, we've been in the event management space of supporting educational institutions for over 15 years now. So today, Event Manager is not the same solution that we went to market with 15 years ago. So if there are any current clients on the presentation today and you're not sure what version you're on, or you may be using the solution that was in the market years back, well, then I would say you can get in touch with us and get in touch with your account manager and your customer success manager, and we can take a look at that. And the important thing is that this is a relationship, and we can analyze your account and solution with you and make sure you're getting the best and most out of it. And if you're happy with that, perfect. And if you're interested in taking a look at Event Manager because you feel like that would be the best fit and increase efficiency and streamline the process at your institution, we're more than happy to go through that process with you.
Okay. Well, Michael, thank you very much for a great presentation. Members of the audience, thank you for joining us today. And with that, I'm going to close our webcast.